Well, hello and welcome to the channel. Glad you could join me for part 3 of our Tiger 1 early production by Academy in 1/35th scale. And this is where we left the model after our last video. We'll be doing some painting and our decals in this video. Hope you enjoy it. So the first thing I need to do is to kind of clean up all these large flat surfaces. Make sure that they're all dust free. And remove any oils or anything from our hands or release compound that might be left on the model from the manufacturing process. I don't always do this, and I usually pay the price for that, so it's always a good idea to clean it up. So I'm just using a cotton swab here and a little bit of rubbing alcohol, and that should clean everything up for us. So next up is all the preparation that we need to do for painting. So here I'm just using some tapered dowels. I just used a pencil sharpener and trimmed them up so that they will fit on, say, the centers of our road wheels. And in some instances, like here, I'm going to use these alligator clips. And that works really good for holding small parts. But it won't hold everything. Another thing that I like to do is use a little bit of low-tack painter's mask that you can get at your local hardware store. This is the purple stuff, and it's really low tack, so it doesn't leave any residue behind. And I can put really small parts on it, and that'll securely hold them in place so that I don't blow these little pieces off all around the paint booth when I'm spraying them. So we also have some photo etch. We're going to use Mr. Metal Primer here to prime these metal parts. That way the paint will stick to these and not flake off later on in the build, and we definitely don't want that. So good adhesion of the paint is something we need to pay close attention to. And you can use Mr. Leveling Thinner. It really cleans the brush really well to get rid of this primer. This primer will set up and dry quickly in the brush. So if you're looking for something to clean that out, that's what I'm using now. So here we're going to use the German Panzer Gray from Vallejo. Now this is a water-based paint, and we're just going to use that thin for our airbrush, of course. And we're going to cover all the surfaces of our vehicle, and that'll also include our road wheels and our heat shields for our exhaust. Every single part, we're just going to paint it all this dark Panzer Gray. And having a really dark color to start off with is really going to help us with our pre-shading. Also, it will provide these little hidden areas, you know, that's hard to get to when we start laying on our top coat color. Providing us with those false shadows and everything that really makes the model come together in the end. So it's really critical that we make sure that we get every single little nook and cranny covered in this dark Panzer Gray. So I've always found it best through my limited experience here that the best thing to do is to lay down a light coat covering everything and let that dry and move on to your other parts, and then come back for your second coat, and that will help the adhesion of the paint. Don't try to get the depth of color that you want on your first pass. Just let that first pass dry and then come back, and then you can darken it up. So now it's time to actually attach our photo etch grills here. So I'm just going to use a little bit of CA glue and apply that around the periphery. That's a big word for me. Of where these grills are going to make contact with the model. And then we can carefully place these grills hopefully right where we want them. Now this is a medium CA glue that I'm using, so we do have a small amount of adjustment that we can make, but we really want to try to get everything lined up right when we're sticking it. And as you can see here, I did have a little issue with the very first one, of course, because that's the one I'm filming. So, but I can move it a little bit, and I don't want to use the tweezers here to try to adjust it, because that would scratch the paint right off of the photo etch. Here I'm using a rubber eraser, trying to press in these grilled screens here, but I wasn't making much headway, so I decided to use something a little bit stiffer, which is just the rounded end of the a paintbrush. And what I'm doing here is I'm slightly just pushing in these screens, which is pretty much what's going to happen with the crew walking around on it and equipment being put on and taken off of the vehicle. So we're just going to give it just a little bit of contour there by pressing these in. And I'm not sure we're going to be able to see too much of that, but it might be visible in the end. You can just barely see it there. Alright, so next up we're going to prepare for our pre-shading, and there are certain edges that we're going to kind of want straight. So we're going to use this Tamiya mask tape here to provide that straight edge, so when we start doing our pre-shading that we do have some nice definition between the two colors. And for our lighter color here, for our pre-shading, we're going to be using the Vallejo white, mixed up for the airbrush, of course. And we'll just start by going right along the edge of the mask and just highlighting, first of all, the top area of our dust and mud shields here on the side of our Tiger. And also we've masked around these fender extensions. Now, once we've laid that down, we can go ahead and remove the mask right here on the front of the vehicle, and that'll clear the way for us to provide that extra definition right here between the vertical and the more horizontal front plates. And now we can move to the roof of the hull, and here I'm just going to use the center fill technique, and just right in the centers of the hatches. And then we're also going to spray what I like to call the traffic areas. Now this is the areas where the crew's going to be walking and scuffing the paint, so we're going to kind of lighten that up right there. And that paves the way for us to come in and use the light on high, dark on low approach here. And as you can see here, I'm just going to outline the top edge of the upper hull, and we'll just carry that right on around the entire top edge here. Now, a lot of people take and cut these mud and dust skirts, well, they're not really skirts, shields, cut them into pieces and have one missing and all that. We didn't do that on this particular build, but we do want to provide some separation. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a little bit of pre-shading technique here. So I just masked them off on the edge there, and we'll just come back in with our Vallejo white, and we'll just do one side of the seam that divides these panels up. And then we'll just come in and remove our tape here, and you'll be able to see that we have some clear definition between each one of these panels, and that should look pretty good when we get the final color on. Now we want to continue on that theme of light on high, dark on low for the turret, and we'll just go ahead and do all the pre-shading that we need to on the turret. I do not show me doing this pre-shading on our road wheels, but it's pretty simple. I just highlight the center of the road wheels, and we also do some of the other parts like the armored guards for our exhaust and the exhaust shields too. And I also go in and lighten up the area right around the commander's cupola, and then we'll also do some center fill on our turret. And so this is what it looks like with our pre-shading done. Interested in really seeing what that's going to look like under the top coat. So for our top coat, we're going to mix up the same Panzer Gray and about 25% white. That'll give us a much lighter gray. And we're going to lay that on over top of all of our pre-shading. So we want to keep our airbrush moving in this instance. We don't want to oversaturate and obliterate our pre-shading. We want that to show through. And you can see we're starting to develop the actual color, and the pre-shading is providing us that color modulation that we really want. And that really helps here with a gray vehicle. And it's funny how we've only used 3 colors. We've used the Panzer Gray and the white and the Panzer Gray and white. So here you can see on our road wheels where I did use the pre-shading around the center of the road wheels. Now the road wheel on the right, I have already dressed up the tires. And the way I do that, I go back to the original dark Panzer Gray. And I'm just going to brush that on. And that will clean up all the overspray that we have from adding our top coat gray color. I'm also going to use that same color to clean up the overspray that's on our air ducts here for our FIFO filters. And we'll just paint those over as well. So I do need to repaint the metal parts on all of our tools. So the German Panzer Gray is our go-to, and that'll give us a nice base color to do some dry brushing on top of when it comes time to weather all of our tools. So we do need a light base coat for our wooden handles on our tools. I'm going to use this Model Master Acryl wood to accomplish that. Now you can use German dark yellow or any tan or sand color for this base color, which will lay down the foundation for us to add some wood grain. We also need to paint up our wire cutters. We're going to use this German red brown here for the handles on our wire cutters, and that seems to be the color that everybody agrees that these handles are supposed to be. So now I'm going to use this metallic gray from Tamiya XF56, and we're going to use that to represent these wear areas on our drive sprockets. For me, it's kind of my go-to color for showing these wear patterns. And we also want to make sure that we do the inside sprocket or inboard sprocket as well, because that can be seen around the front of the vehicle. So we'll do that one as well. And I'll also use this paint for the idler on the rear of the vehicle. That'll show the wear from the tracks making contact with it. So here I have some oil paint. Now this is burnt umber, and I did place it on a little piece of cardboard, and that'll soak up most of the linseed oil that's in the paint. I usually let it set for 3 or 4 hours to do that, and then we'll just go in and use some enamel thinner as the carrier, and we'll just cover all of our light wood color that we've painted on our wooden parts here. And we do want these pigments to be fairly dry before we start our wood graining. So after that has sufficiently dried, I'm just going to come back in with a clean brush with a little bit of enamel thinner on it and try to do some wood graining. Here the brush bristles are just too fine and too soft to do what I want it to do. So I've decided we're going to use this brush here. Now this is a stenciling brush, which you can get for from your arts and crafts store or any big box store that has art supplies. And we're just going to come in and put a little bit of thinner on top of our pigments. And I'm just going to use this stiff brush with these large bristles to put these streaks, I guess is what we're going to call it, into the pigments here to help facilitate wood graining. And that's working much better for us. And now we can come in with a clean brush and a little bit of enamel thinner and just clean up any of those pigments off of the gray painted surfaces that we don't want it to be there. Now we can come back in with our flat steel. Now this is a enamel paint from Testors, and I like to use this in a kind of a dry brushing, although I got to paint a little thick here, but we'll get some of that off the brush and come back in and start putting on some wear areas onto our tools. The good thing about using enamels is that enamel thinner allows us to move around and blend this enamel paint. Now I do have some card, just some thick artist sketch paper that I had laying around, and we're just going to stick it up underneath the tool here so that we don't get this flat steel enamel all over our gray surface of the top of our vehicle. And with a little bit of enamel thinner, we can come in and blend. If we have some areas where the paint's too thick and it doesn't quite look right, we can just blend that out. And if we clean our brush up and come in with a little bit of the enamel thinner, we can blend away in certain areas if we just get too much paint there. Kind of give it a more worn look. And we will do this for all of the metal parts on our tools. Now normally I would save this for the weathering phase, but we really need to go ahead and get this done so that we can go ahead and prepare the model for our decals. And for that we're going to use the X22 by Tamiya, thin for the airbrush of course. And the color scheme that I've chosen is the Leningrad Tiger with the gray. Now there's not very many decals for this, and we're just going to go ahead and cut those out. And that will make it so much easier when we get ready to apply them. So these are water slide decals, and we just need to put these in a little bit of water and let them soak for a few seconds, about 20 seconds. We're going to use micro set with these decals. So what I do is I go in and I lay in just a little bit of micro set, and then we'll pull our decal out of the water and then check it and make sure that it's loosened itself from the backing paper, so we'll be able to apply it. Now I do drain off the excess water onto a piece of paper towel. We don't need all that extra water on the model. And then we're just going to slide the decal right off onto the surface, I think. There we go. So now we can adjust it. Just going to take and move it around, make sure that it's lined up correctly and right where we want it. Now these decals are really thin. They seem to be fairly tough, but they will wrinkle really easy. So if it does stick to the surface and it doesn't want to move, we'll just put a little bit of micro set around the edges of it, and that'll help us locate the decal in the position that we want. And now we can just come in with a cotton bud and pull out the extra water and roll over the decal. Make sure that it's nice and flush to the surface and there aren't any air bubbles or any wrinkles in our decal. And one quick check, and I think it looks pretty good. Alright, now when it comes to the emblem that goes on the side of our upper hull, the Balkenkreuz, we're really not sure for the exact location. because there are clamps that are on these track install cables. So I'm going to use mask tape just to determine what area I have to play with when I go to apply the decal, because these cables are not going to be on there when we put that decal on. And we'll simply repeat this process for all of our decals, making sure that we get everything lined up and there aren't any air bubbles or wrinkles in them. And we'll just set everything aside and let that dry. So it's at this point that I've decided that I need to go ahead and install our FIFO filters, because there's a detail that is missing from this kit that I think we really need to include. And that is the clamps that hold down the ducts. So I'm just using CA glue to attach these. And they're not going to be in our way for the rest of the process of finishing the vehicle, so we're going to put those on. So what we're going to do here is just measure where that detail needs to go. And it's kind of funny because Academy included the base plates that these clamps go on, but there is no clamps. So once we get the measurement, we're going to use that to determine the size of the top flat straps that are going to go over top of these ducts. And there are also some they're either long bolts or threaded rod or something, and I've used stretch sprue to simulate that. And for our top straps that clamp our ducts down, we're just going to use 1 millimeter wide thin polystyrene sheet that is 11 millimeters long. And I did mark out with a pencil the areas where we want to put these little rods. And so we're just going to use CA glue, and we're just going to attach these rods into place. Now we have 2 of these to make up. And according to my measurements, these little rods are about 4 millimeters tall. Now once those dry, we're going to come back in with the same stretch sprue piece and just add a little detail on top of these straps, and that's where this rod would have went completely through. Now I could have attempted to drill a hole and pass this rod through it, but that would have been really difficult to do, and since that 1 millimeter wide strip is so thin, it would probably deform it, so we're not going to do that. And once that dried, I just nipped those off, and you can see we have that little bitty detail on top, and we just painted it up to match the vehicle. Now all we got to do is attach it, which we do with a little bit of CA glue. And here we are with one of the clamps installed over top of our FIFO filter ducts, and that looks pretty good. That's a good representation, I think, of what I see in photographs. So we just have to do the other one, and we'll be ready to move on. So I've decided to use a little bit of craft paint here. This is rust red, mixed up for my airbrush, of course. I thinned it with the Vallejo acrylic airbrush thinner. And I've sprayed a light coat onto our tracks just to give us a little bit of indication that we have some rust there. And that'll get them ready for the next step when we do our weathering and everything else. Well, we also sprayed up the exhaust as well, and those will be ready for our weathering. So that'll have to do it for this video, guys. I really appreciate you watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I hope that you have enjoyed this build so far. If you're new to the channel and you're not a subscriber, go ahead and subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you'll know when I post an update to the channel and to this build. Also, if you like what you see here and you've enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate it if you give me a like. And special thanks to all my subscribers. It's because of you guys that I keep posting these videos and building these kits online so that you guys can see what I'm up to. And if you'd like to leave me a comment, I'd love to hear from you and let me know about your experience in building Tigers maybe. So until next time guys, stay safe.